Hey guys, Katie Zimmerman here. I need to clarify before we get started that I interviewed a special education administrator rather than a teacher because I am a special ed teacher myself. All right, what are your district's child find procedures? The special education administrator talked about his district, how they use public awareness tools, things like district calendars and local newspapers and flyers to get that information out to parents, that the multidisciplinary team takes part of the actual procedures using the Dial 4. Multidisciplinary team would include the early education teacher, the special education teacher, occupational therapist, physical therapist, speech therapist, and then any other specific people that might be a part of certain districts' teams. And they also take in account of the parent, their findings too. He said that this takes place by watching kids play and to see how they all interact together. The principal and the para educator, the para did say that she didn't really know. This is the para that's in my classroom. She is aware of the SST process that the principal talked about, but she just might not be aware that that's what that actually is. The principal talked more about his building level child find procedures, which we do the SST procedure. It is gen ed teacher led. Then we talk about the interventions that we've have in place, what needs to be in place. Observations might include a special education teacher or the psychologist. They go in, maybe they're doing a time on task or something like that. And then at the end, this obviously takes multiple meetings to go through, but then whether or not we need to refer the student on. What do you find to be the most challenging part? This was pretty between the administrator and the principal. They said a lot of the same things. They talked about retention of teachers and recruitment of teachers. The administrator went on to say that he found that and we know this, that there's less people enrolling in the program, so there's obviously less teachers to recruit. And our principal and district are going to one state that I know that they go to every year is Michigan, and so Great Bend schools have a large population of Michigan teachers, which I think is kind of interesting. The staffing, IEP, and MTSS collaboration all go hand in hand for the principal. MTSS has very structured times and limits and things that don't always mesh well with what the IEP states and the special education staff. It's really hard to get that scheduling all together. Very hard. We struggle with it every year. The paraeducator talked about the learned behaviors at home, the lack of support from parents and home environments. The most rewarding part of your job, this was straight across, everyone said student achievement, student pride, student growth, and just seeing their confidence be built and how awesome it really is. And then they also talked about how the teachers react to that. And the principal shared a story about how he loves it when teachers come in with students who have accomplished something that everyone knows has been a real struggle for them. And they come in and they're super excited to share. And he says that's just probably one of the best parts of his job. The administrator also talked about witnessing the training and the resources provided aligning and seeing how awesome it is to see all that stuff go together. Advice on supervision of special education staff. They all said high expectations for everyone, making sure that the gen ed staff and the special education staff have the same expectations. Also to be aware of what's going on, being visible, knowing that when you do your walk-arounds in the morning, the administrators, that they're also stopping in the resource team or in the resource classroom, or making sure that support staff are where they need to be. Also to match the evaluation rubrics for the special education staff. This has to be one of the biggest challenges that I personally have being a special education teacher. I can never reach that last column because they do not apply to the services that I provide. The paraeducator also stressed making connections with students. As a supervisor, they have the responsibility to make sure that they are supporting the special education staff by making connections with students. Working efficiently with parents of special needs children. They talked a lot about making sure that you have open, honest communication. making sure that you're being respectful, and that the parent knows that the number one concern is their student. One of the things that the administrator said that I thought was really great is he said, make sure you remember you're not there to win the argument. You are there to come up with a solution. And I thought that was a really, really great point. The paraeducator said that she doesn't really have a lot of connection with parents, which is something that is a district policy. But she did say that the way that she can, get around that is just to make sure she communicates with the special education teacher so everyone knows what needs to go home and be talked about. All right. The next one was working with general education teachers with students with special needs. This is just making sure that the IEP is explained to general education staff and that they are comfortable with it and understand what everything means. The use of teaching assistants and paraprofessionals is also really important, making sure that everyone's collaborating and that if the parent is supposed to go in there and do X, Y, and Z, that's actually happening. The administrator made the point that the general education staff are the content experts and we're just there to support. And so making sure that we're collaborating efficiently, that's actually happening and that we can support them because, we're communicating about the content. The para talked about how her role is to be in-class support, to establish relationships with not only this general education teacher, but also maybe peers around. So we know, like, hey, these are really good peer relationships. These might be something that we need to stay away from. Super important part. Also to decrease distractions within the classroom and to communicate with the gen ed teacher and the special education teacher about what's going on. Let's see. Next, we talked about the advice for first year administrators. The principal and the administrator said that you need to be observant, you need to be visible, informed, understand the environment before you go trying to change everything. Making sure that you know the why and the how can be really, really, really important. The administrator said, listen to understand, not to respond, which I think is an awesome piece of advice that myself need sometimes. The paraeducator said to know the staff and students, establish those happy medium relationships, that if you are friends outside of school, that it doesn't cloud your judgment within school. To have equal expectations of everyone, support staff, special education staff, and general education staff. And of course, to communicate. She said, communicate, communicate, communicate. You cannot over communicate. We want to know what's going on. The role of the special education teacher and the building principal. The principal said they need to have a cooperative and productive relationship. They need to participate in the school-wide expectations, even if they are employed through the co-op, which is, what we are. And so also to make sure that they have fluid communication. If there's issues with students, he wants to know. He can't support us if we don't, support him. The administrator said to the role of the principal is to supervise. The role of the special education teacher and the principal are to advocate, not only out in the community and with families, but also within the building at our PLCs and our collaboration meetings and things like that. We need to make sure that we're speaking up for our students. And the one thing that this administrator said that I thought was really good was to making sure that when you're doing school-wide expectations, that you take into account all the unique needs of all of the students. Lunchroom rotations and expectations, making sure that you've taken into account all of the students. The paraeducator said they're both there to help the students with all the educational, emotional, and social needs. And also the special education is there to meet what the general education class cannot. All right, last question is the characteristics do you seek in aspiring administration with regards to special education? The principal said working knowledge of special education is so important. Being able to know what the processes and procedures are, understanding what to do if they're not being followed is huge too. The special education staff said passion. He wants to see it and he wants to know that you know what's going on. Being aware of state indicators. And the para said hold high expectations for everyone. Thanks, guys.